Hello, and welcome to another episode of Monster Monday from the Ready to Die channel. Using the rules for making monsters in Pathfinder Second Edition, I build stat blocks of creatures for my own games and to share with the community. I also operate a blog where these stat blocks can be found alongside a Pathfinder First Edition and D&D 5e version, which is linked below along with the Monster Monday Twitter and Discord. Today, I'm happy to present the cruel craven kicker, the Great Maccao. Introduced in Monster Hunter Generations, the Great Maccao is a bird weapon that is a larger and stronger version of the raptor-like Maccao. Equipped with a tail capable of holding its own weight, the Great Maccao almost seems like a cross between a raptor and a kangaroo with the plumage of a parrot. It is an early level monster, encountered as the first 1-star urgent quest in its origin game. Traditionally, I stat these early Mon-Hun creatures at level 4 or 5, and I maintain that custom for the Great Maccao. Lacking any spells or anything else that might suggest a greater intellect, it is merely an animal. A fragile speedster that packs a punch, this kickin' critter is designed as a skirmisher. As such, dexterity is its main ability score, relying on it for both its attacks and its defense, which makes it susceptible to the clumsy condition. With a lot of its eggs in one basket, this fearsome foot-focused foe features low scores among the rest of its abilities. In their lore, Great Maccaos are ovivores, as well as opportunistic scavengers. A high perception isn't particularly necessary for a creature of this type, but I kept it moderate because it needs to be very alert for danger when it's raiding nests. It has a few more skills than most creatures of its type, including an intimidation skill. This is another reference to lore, which mentions that the Great Maccao specifically flashes its red belly at creatures to intimidate them. This isn't integral to the creature, so it's simply a skill with a moderate bonus that actually has a low bonus considering the penalty for not sharing a language. The research I conducted on the Great Maccao described it as a glass cannon with incredible speed. Following this concept, along with its design as a skirmisher, it uses a high armor class, which is something I'm always cautious about doing. I would rather build a creature with a big pool of hit points that the players can hit reliably, than one that they can never land a hit on, but is otherwise fragile. Fortunately, the tests went well and my fears were laid to rest in regards to this, though I did end up reducing its moderate hit points that I had originally assigned it to a low value. Naturally, as a skirmisher, the Great Maccao will use a high bonus for its reflex save, but has a terrible fortitude save, which nicely plays into it being a more fragile creature. The other facet to a glass cannon is making sure it delivers on that cannon part, and if the test is anything to go by, the Great Maccao certainly does, with a wide range of melee attacks at its disposal. There's a lot to go over here, so I'm just going to lay out the bones, and then we'll dig into it. The Great Maccao has a low damage fist strike with a high attack bonus and the agile trait, making it more capable of landing subsequent hits with it, but rarely for great impact. Its tail strike uses a high damage but only a low attack bonus to compensate for the fact that it also has the knockdown ability, which is based on the way that the Great Maccao can smack hunters in the dirt with its tail slam. Watching it execute this attack during my research was the funniest thing I'd seen in a minute. While the Great Maccao is obviously a monster, it has a lot of monk in its DNA, which you might see in its jab ability, essentially being a limited form of flurry of blows. Additionally, part of my initial ideation for the Great Maccao was to include a stance to allow it to switch from tail to standing. However, I couldn't quite make this work with how I wanted it to be able to shift between these two modes of attack as easily as I wished, so I had to abandon the concept. I did keep the general idea with its balance on tail action. This is where the kangaroo really comes into play, with the Great Maccao able to support its entire body weight on its tail, freeing up its powerful feet. These feet strikes use an extreme attack bonus with a moderate damage value, and the only trait they use is the finesse trait found on all of its strikes. Part of the balancing for this comes from the fact that to use it, the Great Maccao has to deal with both an action tax and the immobilization from balancing on its tail. In Monster Hunter, breaking its tail severely handicaps it, and knocking it over midair causes it to drop a shiny. To represent this vulnerability, I included the feature that causes successful trips against a balancing Great Maccao to be critical successes instead. This may be hard to pull off given its higher reflex, but felt like a fun interaction. From this precarious position, the Great Maccao can use its sleeping kick. This is based off of the leaping charge of the boulette, and is one of the reasons I was a little more conservative with the Great Maccao's athletics bonus. To pull off the double kick of this, it needs to succeed at a DC 20 athletics check. With a plus 10 on its checks to jump, it has a 55% chance of success, which felt fair for it to do the big thing of its skin. This ability proved to be fairly deadly in the test, with solid rolls on its kick making these leaps impact hard. Helping the functionality of this somewhat is the powerful leaper ability, based off of the kangaroo's ability of the same name. Alternatively, if the Grey Maccao ends its turn while still balancing on its tail, it leaves itself an opportunity to use its punishing kick, which is also inspired by the kangaroo's defensive shove, though there are some obvious differences. Since this requires the Grey Maccao to be immobilized to use it, I wanted to add a little more power to it. Taking some inspiration from dragon reactions, it gets to make a foot strike, at a penalty, when damaged, and can also knock the target back. For the Grey Maccao's item, its armor only had 2 skills for me to reference: Airborne, which increases the power of jumping attacks, and Knockout King, which increases the stun value of blunt attacks. I considered making a weapon based off the Great Maccao, likely leaning into something katana-ish based off of the Bossmaster Longsword, but I've been having fun trying to come up with options other than weapons. Boots seemed like the next obvious choice for a Great Maccao item, and they of course increase the character's jumping ability. Its activated effect is specifically based on its armor's skills, functioning similar to a metamagic effect that allows its wearer to carry over momentum from their jump into their blow. The extra damage it provides is based on Airborne, whereas the stun effect is based on Knockout King. Finally, we finished this feature for our fearsome foot fiend that frantically flurries foes. A monster built on the DNA of the monk, the Great Maccao is a swift beast that alternates between using its speed to outmaneuver enemies to immobilizing itself so that it can launch its more dangerous strikes. It fares well enough on its own, but could also be grouped with Maccao, which I would represent as elite velociraptors or Jagia, whose talons deal bludgeoning damage. You can check out the Monster Monday blog and Twitter for the stat blocks, or hop on the Discord to join the monster making and general tabletop discussions. These posts also include a Pathfinder First Edition version of the monster, along with a D&D 5e conversion. Thanks for watching and have a monstrous Monday.